Tallulah, get off my desk. She's crawling all over my desk. Girl.
Again? Again?
Yes.
My
She's
God.
bad. She's beautiful, but she's bad.
Welcome to the Incoherent Fangirl.
Where we have a double header of guests today. Is it double header, double hitter?
Double header.
That's what I thought. But then I was
Yeah.
thinking baseball. Is it hit? Okay.
No, yeah.
Sports.
Go sports ball.
Yeah.
I'm Karin from the Oklahoma Academy of Math and Sciences.
And I'm Mandy of Cumberland.
I actually really hated saying that because math and science. Ugh.
Yikes.
Ugh.
You have fun with that. I'm going to
But
be with Scottish princes, so
yeah, you have it better. It's
I have
fine.
it a lot better.
I'll figure it out. You're not going to have it very good right now, though.
Ugh.
Because in our timeline, it is August 22nd, and in y'all's timeline, it's August 30th.
This is freaking me out.
Wow. I swear to God, it was just June.
Hmm.
How? How?
I don't know.
This is rude.
Not a fan.
I don't like it.
Not a fan at all.
Don't like it. That sound means we have an intruder alert.
It's an intruder. It's a
Y'all,
very exciting
it's very
intruder.
exciting. We have Ava Reed, the author of Lady Macbeth, among other wonderful books,
Yeah.
joining us today. We're very excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So, the first thing we usually ask our guests is if you could give us like a quick elevator pitch of the book for anybody who hasn't heard about it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the easiest book to elevator pitch because it's pretty much what it says on the tin. Lady Macbeth is a reimagining of Shakespeare's Macbeth, but from the perspective of Lady Macbeth. It's a work of feminist Gothic fiction, maybe more like historical fan fiction than historical fiction, but still, I think, staying true to a lot of the core themes and ideas presented in Shakespeare's play.
Man, I love
Yeah.
it.
It's,
Historical fan fiction is like the genre that I didn't know I needed.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm borrowing that from Shelley Parker Chan, who describes their books the same way.
I
Oh,
love
I
it.
love that so much.
So what's it like writing a reimagining of an already well-known story, especially like one by the Bard himself?
Yeah, it was definitely, a bit intimidating to reimagine this, very beloved story, and such an important and influential character. Whether you love her or you hate her, Lady Macbeth really is iconic in every sense of the word. She like looms so large in our collective mind. But I think, Shakespeare retellings are also a canon in and of themselves. They're plays, so they're meant to be adapted every single time this is put to stage. That is a reimagining of the words on the page. So, I was aware of the fact that I'm entering, my story into that existing canon, which was, really cool. And, I had kind of the beats from the original that I really wanted to include, like the major themes of, ambition, the capricious nature of power, guilt, fate versus free will, ruminations on gender and womanhood. Yeah, so it was intimidating, but it was also, a joy because this is a story that I love too.
Where did
Right.
you originally get like the idea to approach it in this way? Because, even though it is a reimagining of Macbeth, it comes at it from a different POV than we normally get.
Yeah, so my first kind of, when I decided I wanted to, kind of reimagine the story, I went to Shakespeare's primary source, which is this very interesting work called Holinshed's Chronicle of Scotland. Holinshed's was considered the primary historical reference of Shakespeare's time, but it's also not actually historically accurate. It was this like politically conceived work of mytho-history that was very much intended to create a national mythology for the countries and the peoples of the British Isles. You can tell it's not historically accurate because while Macbeth was a historical king, the story of the witches and the prophecy, that is in Holinshed's. So that was where I kind of went first, and it was actually very hard to get my hands on a copy of it. I could not find a physical copy of this anywhere, so I was like reading it on Project Gutenberg. And one thing that stood out to me was when Holinshed is describing the witches, they're not actually witches. He calls them fairies, which was super interesting because obviously, fairies are also so important and have this huge place in the folklore of the British Isles and of Northwestern Europe. So that was kind of the first like light bulb thing that went off in my mind. And, if you've read the book, then it's, obvious
Yeah.
how that influences my version of the story.
Oh, that is
That's
so
so cool.
cool. That is fascinating.
Yeah, because I never would have imagined like fairies in the setting, you know, because it's already got witches and
Mhm.
so to have that, that's so cool.
Yeah, I started really like thinking about like, okay, why? To me, Shakespeare probably made this change because he wanted, this spooky supernatural atmosphere that Macbeth is going on. But, thinking about what, role fairies play in folklore and, looking at some famous, fairy tales and, some famous examples of fairies and folklore, like the Melusine, who's referenced in Lady Macbeth as well, who's this half serpent. She's referred to as a fairy, but she's a half serpent, half woman creature essentially, and her mating with a mortal man was said to have begotten the line of the House of Anjou, which is this obviously the noble house of the Angevin people. So it's that was super fascinating. That obviously made its way into Lady Macbeth because you're thinking about the iconic line, "Look the innocent flower, but be the serpent underneath it." And Melusine is this serpent woman, and it all
Yeah.
started
It all
to
just comes
Oh
together.
my
yeah
gosh.
into this like amalgam of that eventually produced a book.
Absolutely
How
magical.
difficult was it to marry up all of the different languages? I know that so many characters have like four different names based on the tongue where they're
Yeah,
speaking it or where they come from. What was that like? How
yeah.
was that?
I That was great because I am a huge like lover of linguistics and especially like the social and political implications of language. And there's obviously the author's note at the beginning of the book where I sort of
Mhm.
explain my reasoning for the major characters having these different names. Roskilde, the main character, Roskilde is a Breton name, but she also, has the Scottish variant, the Saxon variant. And I wanted to really represent the fact that in this time period and location, the world didn't necessarily have this rigidity that we have today or that we sometimes imagine that history had. Borders were contested, rights were contested, language was very fluid, everything could change very quickly. And one of the main themes of the book as well, I think, is that very capricious, almost arbitrary nature of power. And slipping between these different languages and these different names, I think was also intended to kind of reflect that theme. And I also just thought it was like fun in a meta sense because Lady Macbeth in Shakespeare doesn't have a first name. So I'm like, well, now she has five.
Yes, I love
That
it.
is so fun.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't really think about that. We were talking last week about how it's been so long since I had studied Macbeth. I think I saw it with my mom in high school,
I'm not
outside of
even
school.
sure that I've ever like read or seen the play like as I was reading it. So I was like, wait, do I know this story?
Yeah,
Did,
it
did you
definitely brought it back.
yeah, did you have that in mind? Like whether did you make any adjustments for whether like if somebody knows the source material or not, or was it just kind of like straight up, this is the story I'm going to tell, and if you know, you know.
I made the decision pretty early on. I knew I was going to deviate from the original play in some pretty major ways, and I made that decision early on. And I tried not to. One of the things I also did is I tried not to use any direct lines from Shakespeare because I didn't want to be relying on that. I didn't want to write, try to write in his voice because like that's just a losing battle. Like you're never gonna. I didn't want to imitate. I wanted to, evoke more than imitate. So, I would use kind of some of like the syntax and like the sentence structure of of lines, but I wouldn't take anything directly. But sorry, what was the question?
Oh, just like did you write it kind of just, I think you kind of answered it just in your own way, or did you want it affect it like readers of Macbeth or people who are familiar with Beck versus people who aren't in a different way?
Yeah, I think I've heard from, as the book has come out, I've heard from obviously both people who are very familiar with the play and people who are not. And I think that it definitely, from what I can tell, has been working for both audiences. I think it absolutely can be read on its own. I don't think it needs to have, you need to have any familiarity with the play to, fully understand and engage with the story. I think that it's almost better in this sense, I think, to go in without, expectations of it, rigidly adhering to the story because it is very much its own story. And I think that it's a reimagining, but it's a reimagining in like a very meta sense where it's very much engaging with the fact that it is an adaptation. So I think, yeah, I think that I wanted it to be able to very much be enjoyed as its own separate work.
I
I
think you
enjoyed it, and I
succeeded.
was like,
Yeah.
I really went into it thinking, do I know Macbeth? And then I realized I was like, I don't actually
Yeah.
think I know anything about Macbeth.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I enjoyed
totally
it, so it
fine.
worked.
This
Good.
is kind of a spoiler, so if you're listening, and you're in the middle of Lady Macbeth, maybe take a break for a second. One thing that Macbeth didn't have that Lady Macbeth has is a dragon,
It,
kind of.
yeah.
What's it like bringing dragons into Shakespeare? And did you know going into it that you wanted to add more fantasy elements, or did it just kind of come
Yeah.
naturally?
Yeah, definitely. So this was another thing where I kind of alluded to it in my previous answer was this is a book that's very aware of the fact that it's a retelling. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was, okay, let's treat Riskele, the main character, as, a real, medieval noble girl. What would she be reading? And she would be reading the popular medieval literature of the time, which is essentially the tradition of chivalric romance. So if she was kind of then telling her story, she would be, in some way mirroring the fiction that she was reading, like in lay people's terms, like she's a romance girly. So she's reading these romances and then she's kind of taking the tropes and, putting them into her own story. And so I was reading these chivalric romances, particularly the works of this female medieval author, Marie de France, and I was looking at them and seeing what, the recurring motifs and symbols were. And a big one is these animal transformations that are also really common in fairy tales. Like the French fairy tale, The Green Serpent was one that I looked at as well, which has parallels in these chivalric romances. Another thing you see really often in these romances is infidelity, which is kind of sounds really bad to us, but you have to understand that for these people in that time period, love and marriage had nothing to do with each other,
Right.
and all of these, so cheating on your spouse doesn't have the same connotation.
Right.
It's the biggest, most iconic romances of the age, like Lancelot and Guinevere, Tristan and Isolde, all have that aspect of infidelity. That was like peak romance to the nobles of the Middle Ages, because they lived in this society with very rigid rules of
Yeah.
conduct, and no marriage was for love, every marriage was arranged. So you can see those are kind of the elements that I looked at and how I built that aspect of the story. And I think that is the biggest deviation from the source material, but it's also like something that I was very, very much set out to do.
Okay, something you said in that answer make me like it made my eyes start to like want to weep. The fact that like you went into research and really know your character enough to like look at what she would have been reading, and you went and read stories written by a medieval woman who would, I don't know that like if she was here today, would she believe that someone hundreds of years later is still reading the words that she wrote down? That
I
is
mean, I
incredibly moving.
I hope, yeah, I hope that her lays are amazing. They're so witty, they're so funny. I would recommend them to anyone. I wish that I could have read them in Francian, but I don't know medieval French. The translations they're very like
Why not?
yeah, I know. I do know some like modern French, so like you can kind of make it out, but it's kind of like reading like Chaucer, where it's like,
Right. Where's, oh
Mm.
gosh,
like
this is
maybe kind of, but
daunting.
it's, but
Speaking
yeah.
of text that is like hard to read, and I'm not saying it's hard to read, but I think that for me personally, I don't think I'm smart enough to read your books sometimes, because I think the language that you use is just so beautiful and like elevated, and I'm like over here like I am reader. What is happening?
I like words.
I know words. So I kind of love that you said that, because I'm like, I kind of feel that way about you sometimes. Like, I'm like, oh man, I really wish that I could understand this better. So
That's a compliment, by the
that, yeah,
way.
in the best, I
We
mean that
joke
in
that
the
we
best.
share a brain cell.
Yeah, sorry. I mean that in the best way. I'm like, it's
I
so
love it.
good that I'm like, I am not smart enough.
I mean,
It's
honestly, I love writing like that. Like my favorite book series, like my Roman Empire, my Angrad is the Gormenghast trilogy by Mervyn Peake, which is this mid 20th century trilogy of Gothic fiction, and it is like one of the most incomprehensible things ever written. Like all of the characters just speak in this incredibly strange way, and it's just like this dense, Baroque prose style, and it also has this kind of fascinating meta storyline of the author, Mervyn Peake, who was, as he was writing, he was dying of a very aggressive form of early onset dementia. So as the series goes on, it gets more and more incomprehensible because his brain is literally dying and his thoughts are pretty fucking scrambled by the end of
Yeah.
it. But it's like the best thing I've ever read. So
Yeah.
I
Oh,
definitely take that as a compliment.
oh,
I
that's so
feel
cool.
like it's something that will be like your work will be studied. And I was actually my nieces live with me and they're in 10th grade. And they were talking earlier about like their dad will say, like, you don't like this teacher now, but you're going to appreciate them one day. And I mentioned that I had a British literature teacher in high school who made us write a bulleted list every time we read anything. Write a bulleted list out of anything that you think might be important. And I used it in college, like that tool that she taught us. And I feel like it made me notice things that just like a cursory read through I wouldn't have. And I feel like your writing is something that like there are so many layers that like take notes while you're reading because then the things like that you wouldn't notice on just a quick pass through are going to jump out and be like, oh my God, but this means this, and this points over to this, and this could be a reference to that in history, and that is so cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, I love that. I actually heard from, well, actually someone that I met at one of my tour stops said that she wrote her like master's final paper on Juniper and Thorn and she like sent it to me, which was so cool. Like I read it on the plane. I was like, this is like absolutely come true. Like that's the best thing
Oh,
ever.
wow, that is so
That is
cool.
incredible.
Author goal unlocked.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna switch a little bit for some fun things. Not that this isn't fun, but this is more silly. We have a segment that we call Fictional Boyfriend of the Week on the podcast, and we basically pick a character from like movies or books that we've really glommed onto. I think last week I was like, Lysander is that's
I was gonna say
for
he
me.
would be mine this week
He was
if we
mine.
yeah.
And so we just want to know like who is your a fictional character that you really like, and it doesn't have to be like a boyfriend. It could be like a bestie. I've had a fictional granny in the past. Just kind of somebody who you think people should meet.
Oh my God. So this is very silly, but my my husband and I have been rewatching Supernatural, which was like my teenage like obsession.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I am such a Sam girly. I love him so much. Like I know that everyone out there is like a Dean girly. I'm like, Sam is literally like he's
Yeah.
just baby. He's like three
Yeah.
out. Like he needs to be protected. So Sam
At
Winchester.
all costs.
He really
Yeah.
does. I'm like I can't like watch him with it. It's not even like a romantic thing. I'm like having like maternal like energy towards him. Like he just is like
I just
so
have to protect my
I
baby.
Just
know.
have
I'm
to
like
keep him
everyone
safe.
I'll be so mean to him. He's so like doomed by the narrative too. Like
I
Oh, that's such
know.
a good
Oh,
one. Yes. Now
yeah.
I want to rewatch.
you should. It's so good. Oh my God. It like not everything holds up, I will say, but like it's
No.
such a fun like series. Like the first 5 seasons are actually just excellent television.
I will never forgive the it's not the writer's fault, but the writer's strike derailing so much of the plot.
Oh, I
Like
know.
they were dropping the nuggets about like all of the mom's friends had died when
Yeah.
yellow-eyed demons had been, and then they never really went back
Well,
to
then they
that.
had like the spin-off or whatever, like the young like Winchesters or whatever. I don't know. I didn't watch that, but
No.
yeah.
I'm still upset that they didn't do the spin-off where it was gonna be, oh God, what was it like something with the girls with Jody, and they were gonna do a spin-off with like a bunch of the girls, and I was like, I want that.
And they never
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
And they
One of
never
the things
did.
that does not hold up very well is the writing of the female characters, I will say. Like
Oh gosh.
it's not great,
I can
You
imagine.
know, that's yeah.
but it's a product of its time, so I'm just kind of like, okay.
You have to
Yeah.
look at it like you do The Office, where it's like that would
Ex-
never fly today.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
None of this
Yeah.
would fly today. That's a good one. Yeah, you're making me want to go back. And my
Hmm.
sister and I, every New Year's Eve, for years, we would just start with episode 1 of Supernatural and spend like all of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day just getting as far as we could, rotting on our couch.
It's so good. It's genuinely just like
Yeah.
I look forward to it like after dinner every night. I'm like, it's supernatural time.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I
it's
love
one of those
that.
ones like it starts off so good too. Like sometimes
Mhm.
with like first
Dad's on a
seasons,
hunting
they
trip.
have to, yeah.
You have to
First
stay home
seasons are
for a
not
few
always
days.
great, but it starts off strong,
It
man.
really does. The second episode, like, is actually so scary. I think the Wendigo one actually is like
Ugh.
low-key
That
terrifying
and the
still.
asylum one where he
Yeah.
turns around and the doctor is just like holding his
Yep.
grabs his face.
Mm.
Oh
Okay, the
God.
one in the, I think it's not until season 4 where it's like the children living in the walls and they think they're ghosts, but they're actually just like feral. Do you remember that one?
Oh,
That literally haunted me for years. Like it was the most horrifying because I grew up in a really, really old house with like secret like rooms and like areas. So like the most terrifying thing for me ever is the idea of someone living in my walls.
oh
Like I
my
don't, it
God.
just felt very
Oh,
real for me
Oh,
because
there
I
was a
grew up in such a
movie
small
like
town.
that too.
Yes, yeah, so that's like
oh.
the most terrifying
Ooh.
trope to me ever. So that episode lives in my mind rent free. Like when we get to that point in the rewatch, I don't even know what I'm gonna do.
You're
You're
like,
like,
I'm gonna
I
have
need
to
to
skip
leave the
through this.
room. Well, we
I'm
just
like,
have
I don't know.
to.
Oh,
Oh.
all right. Another thing that we always like to ask is book recommendations. We know we love your books, but what books would you recommend that we read?
Just on any, I mean, I already talked about
Anything.
Yeah.
Norman Gas. That one's a real deep
Yeah.
cut. I actually just finished a reread of the series of Unfortunate Events books, because those were
Ooh.
my absolute favorite books growing up. And like for my newsletter, I did like a ranking of like 1 through 13 of all of those. Those are incredible. And right now, I feel bad saying this because you're not going to get to read it for a little while, but I'm reading Rachel Gillig's new book, The Night and the Moth, and it's incredible.
Ooh.
That's
Ooh. I
exciting.
love Rachel Gillig. That's going to be exciting.
Speaking of books we can't read quite yet, you had a
Yeah.
cover announcement today, didn't you?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, today has been a lot. But yeah, my my next book is Fable for the End of the World, which is a YA dystopian enemies to lovers sapphic romance. And yeah, the cover was just revealed and that is out in March. Super excited.
It is so swoony. I am so excited for it. It's been on my like Amazon wish list as soon as I like found the listing. I was like, I need this, guys. This needs to happen. But speaking of your next book, this is the part of the interview where I do have to tell you that now that you have been on the podcast, you're actually legally obligated to come back for all book releases. I'm so sorry. We don't make the rules.
It was in the super fine print.
Super
Yeah,
teeny.
okay. I will happily come back.
So yeah, oh gosh. And you have quite a few things coming down the pipeline, right? I mean, Lady Macbeth just came out. We've got the special edition of A Study from Drowning, which is stunning.
Obsessed. Yeah,
I'm
Yeah.
so
obsessed.
obsessed. I'm like, how many copies of this book do I need?
I
This
know.
is
I
so
just got
pretty.
my first author copy of it and it's so beautiful. It's just sitting on my shelf right now.
That's amazing. And then you've got Fable coming in March. Is there something else that I'm forgetting? I feel
There's
like I'm
Fable
forgetting
in March. There's Secret thing I can't talk about yet in June. And then in August, there's The Theory of Dreaming, which is the sequel to
That's the
Stephen
other
Downing.
one. Yes.
Oh, I can't
I was like, I
wait.
know there's something else and I can't think of it. That's so exciting. It's gonna be so
Yeah.
great. What's
It's gonna
it
be such a
like
good year.
switching between YA and adult though?
Honestly, just because of the way that publishing just has these really long timelines, usually I'm not really going back and forth when I'm writing. Like I wrote all of The Theory of Dreaming earlier this year, and then I wrote Fable last year, and then so it was 2 YAs in a row. So just
Okay.
anyway, publishing is extremely chaotic. So it seems like, I've had a lot of stuff coming out and I do, but it's stuff that I have been working on for years and years. It's just that publishing takes forever. So
Right.
it's just happened to all converge this 12-month period of time. I did not want it to be this way, trust me.
You're like,
Never again.
We are very excited about it on our end at least.
I'm excited too, but I'm like, what happened this year can never happen again.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
gonna be exhausting because you got to market and all of that too. Like it's not just the writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we're
We are
thrilled for
excited.
you, but
We're very excited.
we also hope you get time for like supernatural binges and stuff so
Yes.
that you can
The
take care
supernatural
of
memory
yourself.
has been saving my mental health, frankly. But yeah, I'm coming to the end of kind of promoting Lady Macbeth for a little while, so at least that's kind of coming off my plate.
Yeah,
Yeah. Good.
very
Good.
nice.
Well, we don't want to keep you too
Yeah.
long, but we're very, very happy to have had you here. Everybody, please go and check out Lady Macbeth. We
Especially
have
with
to
this
talk
naked
about.
hardcover. I'm
Hold
obsessed
on.
with this.
I'm like,
I
I
can't
can't pull
handle
it
this.
off. It's so okay. It's not coming off, but
That is gorgeous.
go pick it up. It
Yeah.
is out now, and stay tuned for all the other stuff that's coming up because it's all very pretty, and we can't wait for the stories to come. Thank you, Ava, for hanging out with us for a little while.
Thanks for having me.
Hopefully,
We'll
we'll
talk
talk
to
to
you
you
soon.
soon.
Tell Sammy we said hello.
I will.
Bye.
Bye. Oh my gosh. I love Ava so
So
much.
much. My gosh, they're so like just everything.
Yeah.
I feel smarter just sitting here in
Oh
their
yeah.
presence. My gosh.
I feel like I'm
Love.
gonna be bragging to like kids in college one day, like, oh, that book you're studying, I
Uh,
interviewed the author
yeah.
back in my day.
Back in my day.
They're gonna be like, all right, Granny, let's get you back to bed. And I'm gonna be like, no, I really did.
I really did. There's proof on the internet. Is that
And they're
still
gonna
a
be like,
thing?
what is the internet? YouTube? Oh my
Oh
God.
my
It's all in
god.
chips in our brains right now.
What? God,
We've
can
got
you imagine?
supercomputers in our brains.
Can you imagine what the future would be like? Ugh, I don't want to.
No, I don't want to
Wild.
either.
Wild. That sound means we have another intruder alert.
This is
I'm
so
so
exciting.
excited. We have author Kelly Vincent, author of Ugliest, as well as other things, here to talk to us today. Welcome, Kelly. We're so excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So, the first thing we usually ask our guests is if you can give us like a quick elevator pitch of the book and just kind of let us know what's going on for anybody who hasn't heard of it.
Sure. So Ugliest is the third in a series, but it completely works as a standalone, and it's about my character Nick, who's a agender teen artist, and they've gone to a boarding school and they've met a group of friends, their first real friend group, and the group gets involved in ultimately gets involved in activism for LGBTQ rights because they live in a very red state and they're all LGBTQ identifying in some way. And it's just I feel like it's just works as an uplifting, motivating, inspiring book that reminds us that even teenagers can do a lot, especially if they band together.
Yes, absolutely. Teenagers, especially nowadays, are
Oh
very
my
active
gosh.
and
Gen Z
give
is
me
going to change the
so
world.
much hope. So I saw that this series as a whole kind of came about. You had like a writing exercise that you were doing that kind of led to this. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, it wasn't like an assigned kind of anything. It was just more, I wanted to kind of tell my story, and I wasn't sure if anybody would be interested or if it was worth telling, but I basically imagined myself as a teenager today because I grew up in Oklahoma and the whole concept of this non-binary gender thing was new to me as of just a few years ago. And it made my childhood make so much more sense. So I kind of imagined myself as a teenager today and was thinking like, well, so what would happen, if these things happen, how would I deal with that if I were a teenager now instead of back then? So that basically almost everything in the first book, which is called Ugly, is real stuff that happened to me, although I did tweak a lot of it a little bit because, life doesn't usually translate perfectly to fiction. But so yeah, most of it is stuff that happened to me. And I just kind of like imagined how I would deal with it. And when I finished it, I felt like I'd really, that it was actually a story worth telling. And it was a perspective that I just hadn't seen a lot or really at all in what I had seen in YA. There's a lot of LGBTQ stuff coming out, but there wasn't a lot about gender identity back when I wrote it. So I just, I was really pleased with how it turned out. And then the next two books were basically just entirely fictional sequels, imagining my character's journey from a very shy, bullied, uncertain, confused teen to someone as confident and amazing in the last book as anybody could be. So
Yeah, the journey is quite something. Like watching Nick bloom was just
Uh,
so lovely, so amazing.
yeah, it actually
and-
was fun for me because it was almost like me. It kind of like made me feel like, I had accomplished these things. So it was an interesting experience as an author, different from other series or other books I've written. So
I bet.
And it's relatable too. You mentioned them being in a deeply red state and being different from the norm. I'm in Georgia, which is getting better, but it's still relatable. Like growing up in a different time and knowing how people were treated for not being cisgender white straight people, to how I see my teenage nieces treating people. It's night and day and so refreshing. So it's the story that I wish we had back then, in the early 2000s.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
Oh,
right.
God, I'm aging myself. Hold on.
Can you talk about your writing process? Like, are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? Is somewhere in between?
So I really would consider myself what I usually call myself a plantser, but I'm more pantser now than I used to be. But I actually still usually write out I don't write an outline, but I use Scrivener. So anyone familiar with that, I basically create basically a file, not a true file, but like for each scene. And I write like a paragraph or so summarizing what I think will happen in that scene. And usually I have most of the book, if not all of it, done. But the thing is, I deviate from that right away. Like I never stick to it. It just helps me to have this kind of idea in place, and then I'll move forward. And if I change something dramatic, then I'll rewrite the summaries as I'm going. But I don't usually rewrite the old ones as I make changes, so it gets kind of messy. But basically, I need to know where I'm going, but I'm changing that all the time.
That's so validating because that's exactly how I write.
Right.
I'm like, I have like a paragraph. I'm like, this is what happens here. And this is like the worst thing I've ever written because it's so basic. It's like, they do this and they do that. And then I'm like, this is so bad. But then you like actually go in and flesh it out. And I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
I can do this.
I can move this around. I can change this and fix
Scrivener was a
this.
game changer,
Yeah,
truly.
it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm pretending to be in the 1950s, and so I printed my first draft out, and now I've got a red pen, and I'm going through it with a red.
I used to do all my editing on paper. It took me, literally probably 5 years, and I got a great laser printer. And I worked that thing. I think it's totally legit, but I've kind of learned to be able to edit on the computer, which is more convenient, especially when you're
Oh
like
yeah.
a group and you've got like 5 critiques. It's easier to just have them on the
Mhm.
computer than on
My
paper.
husband was like, "Why aren't you doing this on your laptop?" I was like, "Look, I just wanted to hold it. I wanted an
I just,
excuse
yeah.
to hold it, and now that I'm holding it, I want to write in it."
There's something about holding a pen and just doing things physically. Like, I still
Yeah.
prefer reading physical books. It's just like a different thing. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's totally legit. And I just find it convenient that I changed. But
So Karen's further into ugliest than I am, but we were talking about Nick's TikToks. Can we get those in real life?
no,
Because I feel like they're important. I feel
Yeah.
like they're needed and
it's actually
necessary.
funny. Yeah. So I actually tried having a TikTok, book talk as an author. And I hadn't even really started Ugliest at the time. And I have quite a few followers, but TikTok is throttling me. I never get past 200 to 250 views. So I finally just gave up. But if it had actually worked, I probably would. I'd probably go in and like create some of the posts that they do because that would be really fun. But I don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. That's
But
fair.
I did wonder, I
Yeah.
was like, that would be really cool if they could exist. But yeah, maybe one day I'll do it. Who knows?
It'd be a
I'm
it'd
gonna
be,
I'm
it'd
gonna
be
have
like
to go
really cool.
I'm gonna go follow you on TikTok just in case.
Yeah, it'd be a cool like interactive thing too, like reading the book and then being able to see like a video that you just read about in the book.
Yeah,
Like, oh,
it's a
Yeah.
really fun idea. It really
yeah.
is.
So how much research did you have to do to pull up? Because there's a lot of legislation
Yeah.
being proposed and being put into action. How much research did you have to do in that, and how did you like manage your mental health when doing that? Because
Oh,
honestly, like if had to look at as much of that as they did, I'd be like in a ball in the corner, like nobody
yeah.
can talk to me.
Yeah, it was tough. I actually stumbled on something that's actually mentioned in the book. It's the blog Erin in the Morning by Erin Reed. And she's amazing. And she just posts basically almost every day things that are happening. So I use that as a guide. And then I was able to go like research, confirm that everything she mentioned was correct. I mean, I knew it would be, but I'd go kind of check on things and then see if there's anything else I wanted to mention in a different way. But yeah, it was not so great for my mental health to kind of be focusing on that. I mean, it just made me feel like I need to be more of an activist, but again, there's just only so much time in the day.
Yeah.
So, but it kind of really had me. And then, but yeah, it was definitely something I had to kind of like try to step away from occasionally. But yeah, but that actual blog was pretty much the extent of my, information. So
That is so, I didn't know that was like a real blog. That's so cool to have.
yeah, I think I
Because,
mentioned it in the end of the book, like the back matter as,
okay.
She's
have
so
the-
close.
I'm
She's
so
so
close. I'm
close.
so close to the end. Like, I'm just like, gotta read faster, but I have to go talk to people. Darn.
You bring up an excellent point, though, that I don't think that a lot of people consider is that you want to be an activist and you want to help, but at what cost to your personal mental health? And you can't pour from an empty cup. So,
Mhm.
like, how do we find that balance between taking care of yourself and standing
care
up
of
for people who
others.
can't stand up for themselves?
Yeah.
That's
It's
such a hard thing.
Yeah, and it's even there's another question that we don't always talk about, but it has to do with why is it that all these people who are at a disadvantage have to spend their time trying to improve their lot and everyone else's lot, while the white cis men can just sit around and paint or write books or whatever.
Right.
Everybody else has to spend all this time and energy
Mhm.
uplifting themselves and others. And that's not fair. So it's like,
No.
I think it really is important to look at yourself and say, can I really afford to do this, emotionally, time wise, everything? And there's no obligation. But I think
Right.
the problem is a lot of us feel like an internalized obligation, like we
Mhm.
want to do it. But you have to just create your boundaries and just really
Mhm.
pay attention to yourself and how it's affecting you. And there are probably lots of different ways to be an activist. And in some ways, I feel like writing this book was kind of
Yeah.
that for me.
Absolutely.
And that's something I can do. I can emotionally handle more than perhaps getting out and marching. I never go to anything like a march. I just don't feel comfortable in those
Right.
Right.
situations. And so I've kind of learned to recognize that and just do what I can do. I mean, if you have money, donating money is a great way. So
Right.
you just kind of look at what you can do and try to pick something that is affordable.
I'm with you on I want to go to marches too, but I always have safety concerns,
Mhm,
especially in this day and age. And I have children living in my house, and it's like I can't, in good
Yeah.
conscience, take you and potentially endanger you and
mhm.
expose you to something that could end so terribly. So
Yeah,
that's a
it's
hard thing.
definitely,
And
I have a 9-year-old who would love to go to these kinds of things, like to marches, to even to just Pride, the parade and things like that.
right,
She would love to, but at the end of the day, I'm like, I'm your only guardian. Like I can't put you in that situation, and it's so hard
yeah.
because I'm like, I want to celebrate who we are as
And you're proud
people.
of her for wanting
Yes,
to go
absolutely.
too,
But
but
it's like, ugh, it's so hard. The world sucks.
Yeah,
Be better,
yeah.
people.
it does.
Can we talk about something a little bit lighter? Like, for example, the art. So there's a lot of like technical art stuff in here because Nick is an artist and they're learning a lot from their teacher who bless people in the arts, bless adults in the arts who are helping, our youths. But there's a lot of technical stuff in there. Like, was that stuff that you had to research, or are you also an artist? Is that something that you
So
learned?
yeah, so I was an artist as a teenager, which is one of the reasons I made Nick an artist in the first place, because it kind of fit that where I was at the time. But I actually am an artist. I'm just not very good right now because I don't put enough time into it. And it's one of those things like everything, you have to do it more to get better. But I actually wanted to get better during the pandemic and I started a BFA in illustration. So all the technical stuff
Yay.
is stuff I learned on the BFA. And so normally it's not taught in a high school, but that's what I kind of did that made it special and really exciting for Nick to be sort of like learning in kind of an advanced way. So that was a lot of fun. So like all the concepts they talk about, like, oh, why am I
The
forgetting the
the
term?
thumbnailing, I
The
was like,
thumbnailing. Yeah,
I've
that's
never
one
heard
that
of. That's
like,
so cool.
yeah, it's totally and I was really resistant to a lot of those pre-work. I'm usually like, I just want to do the thing.
Right.
But it is so valuable to do those things, even though it kind of sometimes feels like wasted effort. But it is, if you're trying to produce a really good piece, doing some pre-work on it is really valuable. So that's why I threw that in there because it was kind of fun. And
It is very cool.
yeah.
Like, I'm not artistically inclined at all. Like I do words, I don't do things. Like
I can do a
through,
stick figure that would
yeah.
blow your socks off.
But it's funny because you're describing like the pre-work and I'm like I'm sitting here like, oh, does that mean I have to outline before I start writing? I was like, wait, I can't do that. I mean, I could, but I can't.
Yeah, for me, that's where I came from too. I don't do any sort of pre-work really, except for the scene summaries or whatever, but it's very minimal on my writing. Like a lot of writers I know love to journal, they write letters to their characters, they do all these things to kind of like develop the ideas and the characters in their minds. And I totally respect that, but I will not do that.
That's so cool.
I'm not doing that.
That's, yeah, I can't, but that is so cool that you can.
Yeah.
Oh my
I mean,
goodness.
is it everything is work, even if you love it, but is it pre-work if it's something that is like your hobby that you enjoy? So even if it's pre-work of art and learning art and honing your craft, if you're getting something out of it for you, that's what
Yeah,
matters. Do the pre-work or
Fair.
don't, but just
yeah.
let yourself get the thing.
Yeah, I think that, everything is learning. I mean, everything you do makes you better at whatever it is you're doing. So I totally like it, do your thing.
We have we talked a little bit last week about how excellent you are at speaking like a teenager and like having it like the voice, right? And I live with two of them. So like I was like, I'm right at home.
I was sitting there. I was like, hold on, wait, what? Can you grow up?
Yeah,
But
she's like,
like,
can your brain finish for me,
can you,
please?
but like, that's the thing is like you're doing such a good job that I'm like, why are you a teenager? You're so annoying, but like you're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because so as far as like dialogue and stuff like that goes, I think I get that because I actually still kind of talk that way. I talk very casually, but also I read a ton of YA. So most of my knowledge comes from reading other good YA. And but also for this series in particular, I remember how I felt in those situations. I remember the teenage outlook, and I writing this book actually kind of helped me overcome some of the ways I'd interpreted things not quite correctly, but as a teenager would. And
Yeah.
so the growth that Nick goes through from the very first book to the very end, I mean, they're really, really different because they've grown so much. And
Yeah.
part of that is like I forced them to because I'm an adult and I know what they should have done. But like it's
Right.
like the thing where Nick hates normal people. I still felt that way for a long, long time into adulthood, and it's not fair. And Nick learns that long before I actually did. I did learn that, but it's just like just this sort of resentment towards people who can be comfortable and sort of being normal, which like was just Nick thought of that as a bad thing, and it's not.
Right.
Right.
It's not right. And so that was kind of something I did consciously in the books. So
Oh, it's fun.
Yeah.
I want to know. So the copy that I have doesn't have like list of resources. Um,
yeah,
but I would like to know if that workbook that Nick does is a real
that's a
thing.
real book that I got and worked through
Yeah.
so that I could have Nick work through it. I kind of did it for myself too but yeah, it's a real book. And now that you're mentioning, I probably should include that in the book because it is a real book. Yeah, I can
I
probably add that
can't.
eventually. Yeah, I
I
do
think
the
that's
the
really cool.
resources I didn't get together until now there's a version of the book with an actual cover. And that one has some extra stuff in it.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, guys, we got an early copy, so it's like not
Yeah.
finished. So there's a reason that the resources aren't listed, okay? It's not that they forgot them. It's just we have a very early copy. But I was just thinking about it. I'm like, that is so cool. Like, I never would have thought of like a workbook to work through your gender. And if
Yeah,
you're questioning, and I'm glad that's a real thing for people
Right.
yeah.
because I've never struggled with it, so I don't know, but like I'm sure it's amazing for people who
Yeah.
have no clue.
Yeah, there's actually several. I found several when I was searching, and the one I got I liked, although it did get a little, I don't know, maybe woo-woo at times. I'm very literal and
Yeah.
everything is concrete. So for me, but the great thing about these books is that so if you're wondering, is my gender different than what everybody else thinks it is? It's scary for one. And I mean, nobody really wants to be different, but what you'll find is that a lot of times the questions that are in there, you're like, I never even thought of that, but that's huge. And so that it starts to make you feel like, yeah, this is not crazy. This is something other people are going through. These are like a list of questions that the answers to are different for me than they would be from from most people. And so then you start to realize that there is something there, but it also helps you consider whether you really want to come out or do you want to wait? I mean, is it safe? There's a lot of considerations, practical considerations. And my personal feeling is that often just recognizing it for yourself is enough if you're in an unsafe place. Just knowing that you're not crazy. It's not that's not the thing.
Validating.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I know that obviously one of the themes throughout it's a series, even though they can be read as standalones, is bullying. And before today, literally today, I would have told you that's not really a thing that much anymore in high schools, because I never really heard about anybody being bullied when I was in school, and I never really hear about it with my nieces until we sat down at dinner and my niece said, let me tell you about this awful girl in my math class. Another girl was adjusting her shirt and this girl looks over at her and says, you've got belly rolls, and calls her belly roll for the rest of the class period. And my niece is like, I wanted to like stop, but I can't disrupt class because like she's doing it under the teacher. And she's like, I don't know how to handle this, but like she just keeps calling her that. And then there's no reason. And she's like, there's nothing wrong with this girl. I don't know why she's, nobody has 0% body fat at all. And she's like, I don't get it. And it was like, I was sitting there like, I was convinced that bullying really didn't happen that much anymore. Like we'd evolved away from it. No, it's still very real and very, very prevalent apparently. So reading stories like this could be super helpful for kids to
and
know
I mean,
how to
I
deal
think
with it.
that, different schools have different cultures in terms of bullying, but in a lot of places like Oklahoma, the adults are almost as bad as the kids. They may not be calling names, but they do nothing when they see it happen.
Right.
Or they tell the victim, well, it's your fault, you should conform or whatever. And those things really did happen to me. And I don't know if you guys heard about the trans boy in Oklahoma who died recently, Next Benedict.
Yep.
He was bullied incessantly. And I'm like, that whole story was very upsetting for me because it was like, he could have been in my book. I mean, he is exactly who I was writing these for and thinking about. And
one teacher had stepped up.
Nobody helped him.
One admin, one teacher, one kid.
Literally anybody. Literally just one person. Speaking of Next Benedict, I do know that you pushed up the release of this book after that had happened, and in response to kind of all the anti-trans legislation that was coming out. Can you kind of talk about that process? I know it's a little bit different, like trad versus indie pub, but like can you talk about that and maybe let the people know like why this specific thing was so important to you?
Yeah. So normally when I finish a book, I release it maybe less than a month later, pretty quick, because I am self-published for most of my books. And this one, I wanted to hire a publicist because I want to get the message out. It's not about like getting sales. It's about getting this message that I consider very important out. And one of the things that was tricky for me is that they needed it ready many months before it would actually come out. And I was like, oh, so I had to pretty much rush it. And it was hard. And yeah, that was really tough. And it was just a weird experience because it's all done and I have nothing to do on it, but it's not coming out for months. But that's why I did it, was because I wanted to get as much publicity on it as possible to get the message out. And I wanted it to come out before the election because I wanted to influence people who read it and make them realize they need to get rid of these horrible people who are passing all this anti-LGBTQ legislation. I mean, like, obviously the president, election is hugely important, but in some ways, well, it's hugely important, but even if it goes the way I want it to, it's still hugely important that we take care of all the problems at the state level as well. It's not the only one that matters. So that's actually why I did it. And I pushed it up as far as I could between getting it ready and, releasing it in enough in advance for the publicist to, be able to do their thing. Because I've never worked with a publicist before, so I didn't know how that would work. But yeah. So that's basically what happened.
I was screaming the same thing literally at dinner. You don't just vote in the presidential election. You have to vote for all of the, like, 'cause my nieces are 15,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to tell them how to vote or anything, but it's like,
Right.
if you believe in something, you have to vote at the local level too,
Mhm.
because that's going to impact your life probably more than the presidential election will ever impact your life.
Yeah.
Your local elections is where it starts. And I went on a tirade. So
Yeah.
this timing
I'm
is
yeah.
funny.
I'm incredibly lucky because I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. So, I mean, yes, the state and local elections are still important, but at least assuming the presidential election goes the way we want it to, knock on all the things, my rights living here aren't as in danger. So,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's still like I have my friends. Mandy's in Georgia. One of my best friends is in Oklahoma.
Mhm.
And so it's like, I'm like, you guys read this, tell everybody about it, tell everybody to vote because, yeah, the local elections are where the big changes are going to happen and they're going to affect people the most. So,
I'm checking
Yeah.
my voter registration like every day since Georgia
oh God,
has
Georgia.
instituted that new, hey, you just need to know somebody's information, all which was leaked
That
recently,
Georgia is
Yeah.
and you can cancel their
bonkers.
voter registration. Why?
Bonkers. Absolutely
Yeah, it's
fucking
it's
insane.
really like surreal what's happening, honestly. Like, I mean, if you look at the things people are doing, and they're like, I think Florida has a law that says it's illegal to call somebody like anti-LGBTQ or something like this. I mean, it's like they know what they're doing is wrong,
Right.
Mhm.
And they don't
and
care.
they don't care at all. And then they
They're
put
doing it because it's wrong.
I know
Exactly.
I have this feeling that people are just doing things like if they're in a video game and they're pressing buttons to see what they can get away with. That's kind of
Oh
how
my
it
Right.
gosh.
feels. It's people are just doing crazy things. And yeah,
Yeah. We had a conversation before you came on about some like unrelated book things happening on threads and how like, at this point it just feels like people are looking for engagement and that's kind of
Yeah.
what this whole nonsense kind of feels like sometimes. We're like, you can't possibly actually believe this stuff. Like you're saying this just to get people riled up, right? Like
Right.
I cannot compute. It does not compute. Like I don't understand how my living my life is going to affect you all the way in Florida.
Yeah. Living
Please explain
yours.
that to me. I don't get it.
it's just the strangest thing the way these people are obsessing about other people's lives and
Yeah.
presentation and feelings. It's just like incomprehensible to me. I cannot imagine
Right.
expecting other people, like forcing other people to be like me in some way. Like,
Yeah. Live
Yeah.
by my honor code. Why?
yeah.
One of
And
one of the
Why?
things
they're not even like honest. I mean, like, they have all this, they're supposedly these good Christians going against all sorts of Christian values. And, I mean, it's just like they just keep saying things that are just patently untrue. And somehow that works for people,
it's
some
wild.
people.
Right.
But it's just like I keep just thinking, how is this happening? But it is. So,
One of the things that actually really struck me, and I just remembered this right now when I was reading, is when Mac and Nick get forced into the girls' dorm, and they're talking about how not only are they uncomfortable, but like now literally all the girls that aren't okay with it are also uncomfortable. And yeah, they're going to be bullying and they're going to be like awful to Nick and Mac, but like you're now not only punishing, the people who are different, but at the same time, it's kind of, I mean, I don't think of it as punishment, but like, like the normal
Uncomfortable.
people are
It's
now,
a
it's an
different
uncomfortable situation for
situation.
everybody
Yeah.
involved.
yeah.
Like, why? If you're uncomfortable with a trans person, period, why are you now forcing them into your same space kind
Yeah.
of thing? And I never thought of it like that. And that was something that was brought up in the book. And I'm like, oh, I'm learning so much. Yeah, sorry. I just thought of that and I'm like, oh, this is something we should talk about because it's like, seriously, people, what is happening? What is
Yeah,
happening?
it's never about protecting the kids or all these things they say.
No.
It's not at all about those things.
It's
No.
And
control.
yeah, control.
Yeah.
That's
It's
all it
wild.
is.
Well, we do have a couple questions that are much lighter that we always ask our guest, one of which relates to one of our other segments on the podcast, which we call Fictional Boyfriend of the Week, where it doesn't have to be a boyfriend, but we like pick a character from a fictional character. So movies, Movies and film are the same thing, Karen.
I was gonna let you roll with it. I didn't even notice. I was like, movies, film, yeah.
Film and television and books, just a fictional character that we really vibed with, and we're like, everybody should know this person. Do you have any characters like that you think people should know? Like this character, they're my favorite. Everybody needs to know who they are.
So I recently read a bunch of YA about teen activists, and one of the books it's called Anger is a Gift, and it's by Mark Oshiro, I think. But it's about a teen boy who, experienced something like deeply, deeply traumatic when he was a kid, and he has a lot of anxiety from it. And his father was killed in front of him by police, and they're Black. And he lives in a Black neighborhood. So he's kind of famous in the neighborhood, and so they will say things to him, meaning good intentions, but still it's very triggering for him. And so he's really struggling a lot. But in the book, something really terrible happens again, and or something else happens, and he is of course destroyed, but he finds strength, and he finds his voice, and he realizes that he's angry, and that he can use that to inspire people. And he already has that sort of leadership position because of being, the son of someone killed that way. So it was good. I really liked the book, but I really related to him because of his sort of, mental health challenges. And I love to see, kind of how he grew in the book. So anyway, sorry, I took that down another sort of dark path.
No, but I
definitely
love
not a book boyfriend, because he's a teenager and I'm very much not a teenager.
we always like to say that every book character that we read is actually our age, regardless of
When I read Shatter Me, Aaron Warner was Tom Hiddleston. So like,
and he is decidedly not.
No, he's not
age.
a teenager at
but
all.
Yeah, like we understand. We are often picking YA characters as well, and we're like, listen, guys, just remember, they're actually.
I was picturing Ben Barnes here. Okay, I was picturing a grown man,
not a child. We're not picking children.
Okay, so we also like to ask, and you've kind of given us one already, but what are you reading? What books would you recommend? We know we're going to recommend your books to everyone, but what would you recommend to us and to our listeners? I almost said readers. I don't have a brain.
Most of them probably are readers too.
Yeah.
So I've actually been reading a lot of nonfiction lately. But I'm reading the Heartstopper series finally. Kind of late to the game, but I'm enjoying them. And I mentioned that I recently read a lot of those books about teen activism, and there was another one in there that was really good called I Rise. Oh gosh, what's the other there? Right there. I haven't turned the wrong way, but I actually posted on my Instagram about these specific books if anybody is really interested for more. And I'm actually planning to compile a page that talks about a whole bunch of books about teen activism, so that a teacher could maybe make a unit in an English class.
Oh my gosh.
I love that.
But it's taking me time to produce, limited
That's
time.
really cool though.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun.
My dream job was to be a high school English teacher. It didn't end up being my path, but that's something that I would have loved to have had and been able to use.
And that, I feel like that'll help a lot of people too. A lot of kids.
Oh yeah.
Online.
There's a lot more out there than you might realize about that kind of stuff. But one thing I haven't been able to find is I really didn't find any books that had to do with LGBTQ related activism. Most of it has to do with race. And I mean, these are obviously important, but I was looking and I just couldn't really find any. It may not be true that there's none. It was a struggle. I kept trying to find more, and I just couldn't find them.
I can't even think of anything off the top of
my
head.
I mean, if anybody,
Casey Calendar book that I'm thinking of.
Oh yeah, but I was really being kind of narrow in what I defined as activism. I can't remember. I know what book you're talking about. Or at least I'm assuming it's the first one.
Oh my gosh, I read it last year and
I can't remember the name of it either.
The main character has this like stellar best friend too that I would consider like the biggest activist of the whole book. What is it?
Is it? Oh gosh.
I'm gonna Google it.
We're doing really well.
Well, so it's possible I missed something for sure, but I was trying to do things that were more not so much about like one person standing up for themselves. I mean, those are important, but this was about activism, like getting involved in sort of a
Right.
political
Okay.
way, or so that was just for this particular purpose. And there's actually a lot out there like that. So
Yeah.
so it was actually really fun. And I wrote a list for shepherd.com. And I read these 5 books and then talked about them for this list. I'm not sure if it's been published yet, but I talked about each book and why I thought it was good, and so that was cool. But then I found so many more in the process that I just didn't have a chance to read yet. So,
Yeah.
but as I'm reading them, I'm planning to put them up on my website. I haven't released the page yet, but sometime.
I love that.
The book by Case and Callender that I was thinking of was Felix Ever After, which
Yeah,
isn't,
that's the
I don't know
one.
that Felix is a super activist.
No, I've read that and I like that book a lot, but it
Yeah.
didn't fit my narrow definition
Right.
of activism. So yeah.
Okay, so can you tell us, do you have anything coming down the pipeline? Like what's next after Ugliest?
So right now I'm actually not working on any fiction, which is sad, but I'm working on a book related to my day job, which is data science. So I'm working on a book for a tech press. And my hope is this actually makes me money, because my fiction does the opposite. And so yeah, that's supposed to be done by December, but I'm actually having some trouble right now, and I'm not sure. They're being really slow about something that's stopping me. So now I'm like not sure if it's going to be done in December or not. But I have 2 projects after that. Both of them are YA. Both of them actually have a paranormal element. One of them is was my second book I ever wrote. I'm kind of revamping it, and that one is pretty dark, but that's probably the one I'll do next once I, can return to fiction. And then the other one, so that one's about a girl whose younger sister is murdered, and it's terrible, but a lot of, good comes out of it. Well, not really, but you know what I mean. And and the next one is about 2 girls who are, science kids, and they end up proving the existence of ghosts against how, even though they don't believe in them, and they're like, this can't be right. So I just kind of play with that idea. And so yeah, those are 2 that are in my head.
Very
I'm
cool.
excited. My husband
That
is a paranormal investigator, so
It's right up your
yeah,
alley.
I'll have to share them with him too.
Well, we do have to let you know that now that you have been on the podcast, you're actually legally obligated to come back for future book releases. So we'll talk to you soon about those.
I want
Yeah.
to see Karin write up some interview questions about a tech book
Yeah,
in December.
that would be very amusing.
Yeah,
I don't know that I could do it. I don't know that I could do it successfully, but we'd still have fun.
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's not going to appeal to everyone. But there are lots of stories in there. I have examples of everything I'm covering. So I have a story in there about the Challenger disaster and how I experienced that as a 5th grader. And then I tie all these things back to basically data in some way. And that whole, tragedy was completely avoidable if people had shown a different chart to some people. And I mean, presumably they would have listened better if they had a different chart. That's the idea. So there's a lot of stories like that, and my writing groups are not members are not technical. So I usually have them read that stuff, and they usually actually enjoy it. So
Very cool.
Exciting. Well, thank you, Kelly, for hanging out with us for a little bit. Everybody, it's out now. This is not the cover, but it is out now. The whole series is out now. You can get The Art of Being Ugly. It's three books, Ugly, Uglier, and Ugliest, and you can get them now. Please do. They are excellent. Just remember, Nick is a teenager, so when they talk, it's a teenager talking. Don't get too annoyed. I promise it's wonderful. Thank you,
Right.
Kelly.
Yeah,
We'll
thank
talk
you.
soon.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun to talk about it.
Yeah, we've had so much fun, and we can't wait for you to come back.
Thanks. All right. Bye.
We'll
Bye.
talk to you soon. Bye.
They're
I love them so
fun.
much.
Oh my gosh.
One of
That
us,
was
one of us, one of us.
100%. I'm gonna look up this workbook and see if I can like add it to our list because I thought that was so cool. Like it's and so helpful for people
Oh
because
yeah.
and the way, and I forgot to talk about this, but like the way that Nick is talking about their experience, there's one of the TikToks is Nick basically telling their journey of how they came out as agender, and so it's like it's so enlightening for somebody who
Yeah.
is cis who
Yeah, I never would have
gone.
thought
Yeah.
about, like you said, about how helpful that could be for
Yeah.
someone.
So
because it's not my
seriously.
life experience, and it broadens
Hmm.
your view,
And
which
I
is really
really
cool.
think like not the crazy right wing people, but like people who are more middle of the road or
Mhm.
left leaning, who are kind of more quiet about it. Reading this series, I feel like will embolden them to
Good.
move in the right direction. So I think everybody should go read it. Everybody go give it to all your people who are like, my vote doesn't count. Like, no, 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 no. We're not
Yeah, I
doing
got some
that.
teenagers in the house that I
We're
think will
not
be
doing
reading
that.
this too.
Yeah, it's excellent. So, and God, Kelly, love them. Love them so much.
Love them so much.
So much fun. Yay. Okay, so announcements.
Announcements.
So we are wild this month, I
I
guess,
don't know what
because
we're doing to ourselves.
we're a little bit cuckoo bananas, but it's fine. Next week we again have two wonderful guests. We've got Abigail Owen, who is the
One
author
with
of
me.
The Games Gods Play, among other things, and Kaylee Smith, who is the author of the upcoming Phantasma, also of other things.
I don't have it on my desk.
It's okay, I've got them both, and they're real pretty.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk to both of them
Beautiful.
next week. So excited about it. Can't wait. So
We
yay.
also got some really freaking insane news
Oh
today.
my God, wild. This week has been impressive. I'm
Oh
impressed
yeah.
with this.
Oh yeah.
I'm so
We're
excited.
so legit.
This is so much fun. I can't wait.
Mhm.
Yay. And
Yay.
then I think it's time for a
Time
spiel.
for a spiel.
Yeah. All right, friends. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you are listening to us. Please follow us on social media. We are at The Incoherent Fangirl on all the things. I would like to point out that if you see us posting on threads, it's probably me because I'm obsessed with threads.
I
It's
love it. Yeah.
crazy over there. I love it so much. Please also visit our website, theincoherentfangirl.com, where you can also stream all of our episodes as well as read our blog, which we will eventually update again, I promise.
Yeah.
Time, life, whatever.
Yeah.
We're getting there. But if you would like early access to podcast episodes, full video episodes, or bonus content, which will be coming probably in many bursts over the next couple of weeks because there's a lot of content that I need to mine through. You're going to want to head over to our Patreon, theincoherentfangirl.com/Patreon to subscribe. And if you're looking for some merch, we got that too. Head to theincoherentfangirl.com/shop to buy all of the cute stuff that Mandy over here made. It's very cute. She's awesome.
Thank
We
you.
love her. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, design ideas you want to tell us that were pretty, we will accept
Take
all
it.
of
We'll
that
accept it.
in our inbox, theincoherentfangirl@gmail.com. We love hearing from y'all. And of course, one last
Yes.
way to support the podcast is to rate and review on whatever platform you are listening to us on. Please give us your words. You know how we love words here.
Let me tell you a funny. The Beacon TV app is out now, and so the twins downloaded it and rated it, but one of them accidentally gave it a 4. She's fixed it now. She's thrilled with Beacon, and no one's been coerced into leaving specific reviews, but we knew it was a mistake.
That's so funny. I
Josh
love.
was like, somebody tanked our reviews already.
I love them so much. Oh my gosh. All right. And she is at Mandy Perv on all the things.
She's that Ms. Made in China on all the things.
And once you have followed us on social media and you followed the podcast on social media, you can head over and visit our internet besties who you know we love very much.
Yes.
First stop, you're going to head over to herecomesthenerd.com, use code FANGIRL, and you'll get 20% off your first order.
Then you're going to head over to onceuponabookclub.com, get some bookish goodies to go with your art. We have 2 codes. You have to pick one. You can't, they don't stack, but we love you no matter which one you use. Use either code Karin10 or Mandy10 to get 10% off. Just make sure you spell Karin right or you'll get no percent off, and we will point and laugh at you and make fun of you in our text.
And once you have done that and not been laughed at in our text, you're going to head over to visit our dear friend Amber D. Lewis at amberdlewis.com, where you will add 10 of everything to your cart because you will absolutely need extras. And then you're going to use code FANGIRL10 to get 10% off the 10 of everything, thereby saving everybody money.
Lots of
obviously.
money. I feel like we did the math.
That,
And
yeah.
that's one thing free, right? If
Hmm.
you get 10 of everything, then the 10th
Yeah,
one is free.
exactly.
I'm going to say it very confidently so that you believe us.
That
We're
is how
math
math
girls.
works.
You're from the Math Institute this week.
Exactly. So
We trust
it's
you.
legit. It's legit.
And once you've gone and bought all of the things from Amber, you're going to go support the show husband. So we've got searchersbelieve.com, the Paranormal Mind, and Beacon TV. So Beacon TV is our new streaming platform, streambeacontv.com. If you use code fangirl10 to subscribe, you'll get 10% off. Then also on the Searchers Believe website, searchersbelieve.com/shop. If you use code fangirl10 there, that was a mouthful. You'll also get 10% off of merch designed by yours truly. So
She's out here designing merch for everybody.
I just,
It's
yeah.
great times. Also, actually, speaking of merch, some exciting news to
Oh,
share that I
yeah.
totally forgot about until this very moment. We officially have licensing to
Yeah.
use Lauren Congestion's book covers, so that is coming soon. So
Yes.
keep an eye out. It's very exciting. And a reminder to everybody, if you follow us on Patreon or you're subscribed to our Patreon, we do also have recommendations listed on Patreon, so you can visit our
Yep.
friends. Here Comes the Nerd, Grimoire Tea, and the Searchers. Unfortunately, Patreon does not let us recommend 18 plus content, which is nonsense. So we're not able to link directly to Amber DeLewis, but hopefully one day Patreon will
Yeah.
get it together and we'll do that.
But
So,
as of now, just go
just
subscribe to Amber's Patreon too. We just
yep.
can't link you there on
Yep,
our Patreon.
exactly. And I believe that is the Incoherent
That's the
Fangirl.
Incoherent Fangirl.
Thanks
Thank
for listening.
you.
We
We
love
love
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
We are sponsored by our friends at Here Comes the Nerd. Pins, stickers, magnets, and more. Here Comes the Nerd has happy art for all fandom-loving hearts. New customers can use coupon code FANGIRL during checkout for 20% off their first order at HereComesTheNerd.com. Coupon applies to ready-to-ship items only.